Awesome. Thank you. All right. Oh, my God. There's a lot of you. Okay. Web Summit, are you guys enjoying this session so far? Is it awesome? Woo! Okay. So I just wanted to start out by acknowledging that the world is quite messy these days. So everything from the environment to politics to technology to education is changing at such a rapid pace. And some of this change is for the good, and some of it is definitely not. And so as creative people, we want to try and make sense out of this chaos. We want to put our creative energies towards making the world a better place. So I love this quote from Mary Lou Cook. She says, "Creativity is inventing, experimenting, growing, taking risks, breaking rules, making mistakes, and having fun." I feel that this quote really sums up what drives us as creatives. So everything we see around us has been touched by creativity, from our homes to our cars to our clothes to the food that we eat. Everything we interact with and experience throughout the day has started from an idea, an inspiration, a need to solve a problem, and to make something better. So this chap, Johannes Gutenberg, he had an idea. Did he think this idea was going to change the world? Maybe, I don't know, probably not. But that's exactly what it did. The mechanical movable printing press is one of the most important inventions of the modern era. It began as a way to produce documents, but it became a way to transmit knowledge unlike any the world has seen before. So, 500 years after Johannes Gutenberg after the modern publishing era came around, another revolution took place, and Adobe was born. So these are the founders of Adobe, John Warnock and Chuck Geschke, and they created PostScript. And this created a radical new approach to printing marks on paper, just as happened with the Gutenberg press. And just like the Gutenberg press freed the control of putting words and documents and thoughts out into the world from the scribes that were scratching away behind monastery walls, PostScript expanded publishing beyond the presses and into the offices and homes of everyday people. These advances, though hundreds of years apart, enabled the digital era, and the world of graphic arts, printing, and publishing have never been the same. So now Adobe has been around for just coming up on 35 years and has one of the most extensive product portfolios probably out there. So our tools give everyone from emerging artists to global brands the ability to design and deliver exceptional digital experiences across multiple screens, devices, platforms of all kinds. So I head up the global experience design team at Adobe, which means my team designs all of the tools that Adobe puts out in the world. And as we are designing these tools, we are taking into consideration the needs of modern design. Because as we all know, design in its broadest terms is becoming increasingly more complex. So there's more data. There are more immersive technologies, things like machine learning, artificial intelligence, augmented reality, virtual reality. All of these things are changing the way in which designers approach their work. The demand for content is exploding, so if all of you out there are creators, you understand this. It has been for quite some time. And the need to communicate our brands consistently and beautifully across multiple screens, devices, and channels is now the new norm. In addition, user expectations have fundamentally changed. We now have a generation that has grown up on mobile devices, social networks, immersive games, And we're seeing toddlers learn to touch and navigate on a screen before even learning how to walk. Amid all of this, we are creating at a much faster pace than ever before. We are balancing visioning while doing the more tactical aspects of design, and all the while we are collaborating across multidisciplinary teams, which requires a lot of connecting, communicating, and being able to blend both business and technology needs into the best product experience or brand expression ever. So this is a lot of stuff. There's a lot of changes. There's a lot going on in the world of design and creation. So how do we manage all of this? How do we scale design to keep up with these complexities and demands on our time? So at Adobe, we have a deep heritage with products like Illustrator and InDesign and Photoshop. And so we're continually working on making these products better and getting them in the hands of creatives. And all the while, we are creating new modern tooling that addresses the way new designers work. So we have 2 new products that we just launched, Experience Design, which is a tool for user experience design, basically, for designing, prototyping, and sharing screen experiences of all kinds. And then Dimension, which is a 2D and 3D graphic design tool, which enables designers to realize their brands on physical products and in scenes without having to create a photo shoot or learn the difficult world of 3D. Okay, so as I already shared, we have this gigantic product portfolio at Adobe. It's both broad and deep, and it has to address the needs of a very diverse user base. So in order for us to scale, scale design at Adobe, we have defined a living design system that we call Spectrum. So this system allows us to design both horizontally and very deep and in a very consistent way with efficient processes. So that's what I wanted to talk to you for the rest of my talk, is basically about scaling design and what a design system actually looks like. So the purpose of a design system is to help achieve greater consistency and quality across a product line, and also to make the process of building software more efficient. But a design system alone, so just the visual elements, will not achieve scale. It needs to include both the 3 things up here, so design, technology, and operations. So the design aspect is basically design principles, guidelines, the visual parts and pieces. The technology is obviously the underlying CSS, all of the code that makes up the component parts, and then finally, there's operations. So I'm going to get into what design operations is, but this is a critical aspect to any design system. So we have a long-standing statement at Adobe, which is the person down the hall from you already solved the problem you're working on last week. So part of our design system is to bring a cohesive whole to the work that we're doing, and we don't have duplication of creating of design patterns, that sort of thing. We said scale is achieved by not duplicating work. So I want to share some of the complexities of design at Adobe, and to do that, I'm going to share a short clip of a video from one of the design directors on my team. His name is Sean Cheris, and he's going to talk a little bit about that now.
So, good old Photoshop. Who here uses Photoshop? Who's been using Photoshop for 5 years or more? Keep your hands up. 10? 15? You, sir. How many icons are in Photoshop? I know. I'm sorry to put you on the spot. Take a guess, though. 150. Yeah, people normally guess between 150 and 400. The correct answer is around 1,400. And that's not assets, that's icons, that's base vector shapes that are in Photoshop. There are so many modal dialogues and crazy corners in that thing. I've been using it for over 20 years, and I don't think I've probably visited every corner. If we're talking assets, it's even crazier because we have to render them in light and dark UI, 1x and 2x sizes, and 3x is coming, and 4x and 5x. And then there's a crazy amount of cursors. There's about 500 or 600, and of course those have to be rendered in light and dark and for all kinds of different situations. And then if you start thinking about the rest of the Creative Cloud offering, it gets pretty staggering.
Okay, so that's icons, and obviously that's a lot of assets that we have to manage, and that's just one very small component of a design system. So now I just wanted to kind of deconstruct this. This is just a simple UI element. It's a button. This example shows some of the breadth of the design system as well. So this button itself has over 1,000 permutations, has all of the different states, standard and quiet styles, 5 different states, and then rendered on our 4 different background colors. And then we designed for 6 different platforms. And so all of our components and parts and pieces need to work across all of these. So I'm going to go into a little more deeper detail about Spectrum. So our design system is called Spectrum. It's minimal, it's functional, it's beautiful, I think. And it brings a unified experience to all of Adobe's products. But beyond the guidelines and the design elements itself, the component sheets, all of the parts and pieces, my team is responsible for all of the code that underlies these component parts and pieces. So I'm just going to click through a few examples just to show Spectrum in action. And so this is Adobe Analytics. This is one of the flagship products in our Experience Cloud. This is Adobe Document Cloud, which is basically Acrobat running in the cloud. This is Adobe Stock, which is our photo stock service, Photoshop, and Lightroom. So in the examples you saw, they're not one-for-one consistent. But what we try to use Spectrum for is to not be super rigid, but to have continuity across all of the different experiences so that our users feel comfortable at home no matter where they're at, because we have people that cross over everything. This is just a quick Spectrum component sheet. So we have lots and lots of these that show all of the parts and pieces. And then we have very extensive guidelines. This one is an example of a grid guideline for all of the different patterns. Okay, grids, go away. All right, and then this is an example of an app frame, and this is the app frame we're using to design all of our new modern apps. So Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign have been in the world for over 25 years. As we're building new things, we're starting from scratch, and all of these have to be able to extend across multiple screens, multiple devices, and so we're looking at how we can have consistency and continuity across all of these different things. All right, but Spectrum is way more than the aesthetics. It's also about the way in which the products are used. So our guidelines, provide the principles, the structure, the visual elements. This all helps with that consistency and continuity I've been talking about, but our design system must also work across all of our products and all of the various needs of our diverse user base. So I just want to talk about that for a little bit. So we have our products, we design workflows that cross departments, from creative to marketing to sales, or things like knowledge workers or salespeople. And so all of these work together, and so we want to make sure that our product experience is tied across all of that. So we have a couple of foundational elements or horizontal workflows that we designed for assets and managing of assets and how those flow across Photoshop into the Experience Cloud and then back again. That's a super hard one, which we're working on. Universal search, being able to find things across all of our applications and surfaces, is also critical. Review and approval. So as I said, content is exploding and we need to get things out fast into our users' hands. So being able to get it created, get it reviewed, get it approved, and get it out is super critical. And then finally, metrics and reports. And so one of the things that we like to do at Adobe is be able to connect that content back to data and analytics and how it's performing. So now I have another video just showing how this all ties together. So this is the designer starting in our stock photo service, looking for an image that they're going to use in their next campaign. So they can license it right here. That will show up in Creative Cloud libraries in Photoshop. They can go ahead and finish out the design and then pop over to Document Cloud where they can send this for review. And then the stakeholders reviewing can get that right on their mobile phone and add comments, which will go directly back to the designer in Document Cloud where they can address the comment. And so again, with assets and file management, we have that here. The user can go and publish that new asset, and it appears, in this case, on adobe.com. So that is Spectrum in action. And now I just wanted to, sorry, it's not done. So this is showing in Adobe Analytics, after that asset's been published, you can go in and see how it's performing. All right. So that's Spectrum. Now I wanted to get into the technology of what's beneath all of the component parts. So we call this Spectrum DNA. And what DNA aims to deliver are the most current Spectrum attributes and assets wherever they may be needed. So we have 25 different UI frameworks at Adobe. And we have a new one that we're creating for all of our new apps. So providing the visual assets in and of themselves will not work. So we created DNA as a means to provide design as data. So let's take a look at that. So the way it works is we start with the design variables, and that's what these are. It's basically what you would redline or specify to your developer. And then there might also be design files, so like the icons that Sean was talking about, and these are all SVG, so we can get those variables as well. So all of this goes into the DNA repository, and then we deliver that to our product teams as a service. So this whole stack is what we call Spectrum DNA. So how this works, so if we make a change in Spectrum DNA, we make the change to the code, that will push out to all of our frameworks, into the design resources, so things like Creative Cloud libraries, our component sheets, and then also to all of the properties where our design guidelines are presented. So everything is always up to date, and here's just a simple example of Spectrum being updated in the design resource. It gets pushed out to XD or Illustrator or Photoshop or wherever Creative Cloud libraries might be. And magic, it's always up to date. This is a view of the Creative Cloud library in XD. And that is the magic of Spectrum DNA. All right, so now I want to talk about the last thing, which is design operations. This piece is very critical. If we don't have efficient processes or the infrastructure to support a design system like this, it will fail. And believe me, we've tried for many, many years, and we're just gaining traction now that we have all of the underlying code. So for the operational aspect of it, we have things like scorecards so that we can objectively assess whether or not a product is meeting a Spectrum grade. The operations is also how we engage with our customers, whether they're internal or third party. We're always trying to improve the system based on the needs of our customers. And also the design operations, they take care of all of the tooling or the way in which we engage around Spectrum. So design operations is super, super important. All right, so what have we learned? We've learned that this is super hard. Scaling design is not an easy thing to do. So my team is 280 designers at Adobe. We have an engineering population that is, I don't know, 12,000 probably. So we are sorely outnumbered, which means for us to meet all of the needs of moving our heritage, our products such as Photoshop and Illustrator forward, alongside creating new products, we have to have a system that can scale, and that system needs to include design, technology, and the operations that they all play a critical role. So that is design at Adobe, and I hope it was useful and interesting for you, and I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.